Let's go back in time. It's Budapest, 1942. The world is literally on fire. And you have this man, Rabbi Yissachar Shlomo Teichtal. He's a sheltered Talmudic scholar, and for his whole life, the ancient texts of Judaism have been his fortress. But now, that fortress is crumbling down around him. The chaos of the Holocaust is dragging him out of his study, forcing him to face this one single agonizing question. Why is this happening to my people?
Right, so let's just dive straight in. We're starting with Rabbi Teichtal's own words, written from the absolute heart of the storm. This isn't some academic paper written from a comfy armchair. Right from the get-go, he's telling you this whole book, this entire theological quest, is a matter of life and death. It was born in a moment where he and his family stared death in the face and were, as he says, miraculously pulled back.
So, you have to ask, how does a crisis like that change a person? That's what this first part is all about, exploring his profound personal transformation. I mean, just look at the difference here. It's night and day. Before the war, Rabbi Teichtal's world was the four corners of Jewish law. He stayed away from the big, messy political questions. But then the war comes, rips his students away, and leaves him utterly alone. His entire world gets flipped on its head, and he's forced out of that intellectual bubble to deal with this massive, unprecedented disaster.
And it's in this moment of pure terror that he does something, well, something straight out of the Bible. You know, just like the patriarch Jacob made a vow to God when he was fleeing for his life, Rabbi Teichtal does the same thing. He makes a pledge. He says, God, if you let me and my family survive this nightmare, I will dedicate my entire being to writing a book that will uncover the forgotten power and spiritual merit of the land of Israel.
Now that vow wasn't just a promise. It was the spark for this incredible theological journey. Let's dig into the idea he felt he had rediscovered, an idea so powerful, so urgent, he believed it could actually change the course of history for his people. And you can actually see his thought process laid out here, step by step. It all starts with one little spark. He's reading a letter from a famous Hasidic master. But he doesn't just stop there. He starts digging. He goes deep into the foundational texts, finding a hint in the Torah itself. Then he finds more support in the ancient rabbinic writings. He's not just pulling this out of thin air, he's building an ironclad case, brick by brick, source by source.
Okay, so this is the absolute core of his argument, the big idea. For Rabbi Teichtal, the land of Israel isn't just a spot on a map. It's not some far-off dream for the end of days. He's arguing it has an active, tangible spiritual power, a merit that can be tapped into right now. It's a spiritual lifeline, just sitting there, waiting for the Jewish people to grab hold of it in their darkest hour. But that leads to a really tough question, right? If this incredible power exists, why was this horrible catastrophe happening? Well, for Teichtal, the answer was radical, and it was painful. He believed the disaster was a direct result of a huge spiritual failure. The Jewish people had simply gotten too comfortable in exile.
He paints this incredibly stark picture. To him, living in exile is like being in a prison. It's a place where God's presence feels hidden, where you're spiritually cut off. But the land of Israel? That's home. That's the one place where a direct, open line to the divine is even possible. And he argues that neglecting that home, forgetting where they truly belonged, had led directly to this disaster. And this right here, this is maybe his most stunning, most world-shaking idea of all. He's completely reframing almost 2,000 years of Jewish history. All the suffering, the persecutions, the pogroms, and now this, the ultimate catastrophe. He says it's not random. It's not just punishment. It's a message. A series of increasingly loud, increasingly desperate wake-up calls from God, all saying the same thing. Your time in exile is over. Come home. Now, you can imagine an idea this revolutionary, it's not going to go over well with everybody, especially inside his own community. And Rabbi Teichtal knew it. He saved his sharpest criticism, his most pointed words, for the religious leaders who were actively fighting against the idea of returning to Israel. And man, he does not pull his punches. He makes this direct and frankly pretty incendiary comparison to the biblical story of the spies. He says, just like those ancient leaders were scared of losing their power and so they scared the people away from the promised land, today's rabbis and community leaders are doing the exact same thing. They're discouraging people from returning because they're afraid of losing their comfy jobs and their status in the diaspora.
So this is basically his psychological diagnosis for why they're resisting. He's saying they're fancy theological arguments against Zionism. That's all just a smokescreen.
The real reason, he claims, is simple personal bias. Their comfortable lives, their positions of power, their businesses, all of that stuff acts like spiritual blinders, making it impossible for them to see the truth of what's happening. The title of his book, Eim HaBanim Semeicha, The Mother of Sons is Joyful, well, it comes from something incredibly powerful and deeply personal. It's rooted in a true story that he witnessed with his own eyes in the middle of all this darkness.
Okay, so picture this. It's Slovakia, Passover of 1942. A decree goes out to round up young Jewish women, and a father is trying to do the one thing any parent would: save his kids. He tries to smuggle his 2 young daughters across the border to safety, but they get caught.
Back home, his wife, their mother, is just waiting, in absolute agony. The holiday that's all about freedom has turned into this living nightmare for her. She's convinced her husband and daughters are gone forever, on their way to a concentration camp. But then, a miracle. Against all odds, a local rabbi takes this huge risk, bribes some officials, and manages to get them released. The father and his 2 girls are freed, and they start the long walk home. Rabbi Teichtal himself describes this moment of reunion. The mother is waiting outside, she sees them coming from far away, and she just breaks. She doesn't shout, she doesn't even speak, she just breaks down and weeps with a joy so profound, so overwhelming, that there are no words for it. The pure joy of seeing your children literally come back from the dead.
And that story, that's everything. That's the heart of his entire book. Rabbi Teichtal says the land of Israel is exactly like that mother. She has been weeping for 2,000 years for her children who are scattered in exile, and she is waiting with this deep, aching love for that same indescribable joy, the joy of her children finally coming home.
So when you take a step back, what's the big takeaway here? Out of the unimaginable darkness of the Holocaust, Rabbi Yissachar Shlomo Teichtal created this radical, urgent theology of action and hope. And his story really forces us to ask a profound question, not just about him, but about ourselves. How do our own moments of greatest crisis reshape our most fundamental ideas about the world and our place in it?